Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and the Samsung S22 Ultra and the iPhone 14 Pro Max are both the flagships from Samsung and Apple. Both are great in their own respects, but there's some differences that may have you considering one over the other. So I wanted to help you decide which would be best for you. So we'll cover the major differences in this video, such as the overall design, build, display, cameras, battery, and more. But since things like price can change depending on where you live, we'll go over the major changes. Now, the first thing is the build, design, and feel. The S22 Ultra is made of aluminum or aluminium, depending on where you live. The outside edge or frame is completely aluminum, and you have glass front and back. And the glass is Gorilla Glass Victus Plus, which is very durable, although in certain drop tests, you do find that the 14 Pro Max, maybe because of its flat display, seems to be a little bit better with those drop tests. But you can see as we go around the outside edge, it's very typical Samsung. You have your microphone at the top. On the right-hand side, you've got your volume button and your power sleep wake button. You also have a millimeter wave antenna. And then as we go to the bottom, we have a SIM card tray, we have USB-C, a speaker. You also have a built-in S Pen, which is great if you want to use that for notes. And then not really anything on the other side other than antenna lines. Of course, the display and cameras on the back, we'll talk more about that in a moment. With the iPhone 14 Pro Max, well, it's more of a candy bar slab style phone, but it's stainless steel around the outside edge. So you've got stainless steel with glass on the back and front, and this time around they call it Ceramic Shield. Apple has had this for a few years. It seems to hold up very well to scratches, and like I said, seems to be a little bit better in drop tests, maybe just because the screen is more protected by the display where it doesn't curve over the edges. And as you can see, as we go around the outside edge, iPhone hasn't changed in quite some time. So you've got your volume buttons on the left with your silent switch, nothing really on the top. On the right-hand side, your power sleep wake button, your millimeter wave antenna, and one thing you may have already noticed is on the other side, we don't have a SIM card tray, at least in the United States. If you're outside the US, you'll have a SIM card tray, but in the US, you won't anymore. And then, of course, on the bottom, we still have Lightning with our speaker and microphone. And so both are built really well. The iPhone does feel a little bit heavier, and it is heavier at 240 grams or 8.47 ounces, where the S22 Ultra is 228 grams or 8.04 ounces. You can feel a little bit of difference. It's not a huge change, but it definitely feels different. And I'd say the S22 Ultra feels very comfortable to hold, but because it's curved around the outside edges, it feels a little more slippery, and this corner sticks into your hand a little bit. If you're using a case, of course, you won't notice that, but you definitely feel it as compared to the curved edge on the iPhone. As far as the displays are concerned, well, they're both very, very good displays. In fact, Samsung makes both of them. On the S22 Ultra, we have a 6.8-inch display at 1440 by 3088 pixels at 500 pixels per inch. It goes up to 1750 nits of brightness. It's super bright, looks great outside, and the same is true with the iPhone 14 Pro Max, where we have up to 2000 nits of brightness. So the 14 Pro Max has a slightly smaller screen at 6.7 inches, 1290 by 2796 with 460 pixels per inch. Both look really, really good. However, the iPhone is technically brighter outside, but that's going to be very difficult to see. If you're using this to watch movies or anything else, both are great that way. Now, of course, with the iPhone, we have the dynamic island at the top, and this is a great way to handle the camera and sensors. However, some people may not like this. If we go into music, for example, we'll play a song, swipe home, it goes up to the dynamic island, and it's sort of a notification area to let you know what's going on. Press and hold, we get our music player. If we tap on it, we go back to music. It's something that's very nice, but as using the iPhone for a while is something that's just more of a convenience and a nice sort of interface touch. It doesn't really make a difference to the overall usability of the phone, though. And one thing that might be bad about the dynamic island is it cuts into YouTube videos that are sort of 18 by 9 or ultra wide. So if we go into the same video on both devices, you'll see as we're rotated to landscape, it actually cuts into the dynamic island a little bit with the footage. So that's something you don't see on the S22 Ultra in the same wide footage, where it goes right up to the camera on the left. It's not cutting into the footage itself. Of course, if you zoom, you can see that it goes right around the dynamic island, and the same is true with the Samsung. It goes around the little camera icon here, or the little camera itself. So It's not really a problem for many people, but it may be something you want to consider on the 14 Pro Max. So it does sort of stick into different content. If that drives you nuts, you may want to consider the Samsung. Now, PWM is something a lot of people ask me about. That's pulse width modulation, and it's the way the phone controls brightness. It actually controls brightness by flashing the display faster or slower. The more bright it is, the faster it's flashing, and then typically at full brightness, it's just on. However, the overall PWM rate seems to be a little bit better on the iPhone or less harsh on the eyes. Typically, this can bother people's eyes, making them feel nauseated or maybe just causing eye strain. Usually about 1 in 10 people have this issue. I definitely feel the eye strain on the S22 Ultra. However, it's not like older devices, so they're both very good that way, but I'd say the iPhone is better this way. At 240 frames per second under slow motion, you can see the difference here as far as the flashing goes. So it's hard to pick up with the iPhone. You can see the screen flashing in slow-mo with the S22 Ultra. You can't see this with your eyes though. You can only see it under the slow-mo camera. However, it can cause people to feel the effects of that and just not be comfortable looking at the display for long periods of time. Both have great cameras, but with very different specs. However, the overall result seems to be very similar. With the S22 Ultra, we have a 40 megapixel camera in the front with an f2.2 aperture that can record up to 4K 60. It looks pretty great, and we'll compare them in depth in just a moment. With the iPhone 14 Pro Max, we have a 12 megapixel f1.9 camera that can record in 4K 60 ProRes, so a little bit higher quality as far as the bitrate, but the overall end effect is really not as big as you might think. As far as the back is concerned, that's where we have some very big differences with camera specs. So on the S22 Ultra, we have quad cameras, 108 megapixel f1.8, a 10 megapixel f4.9 periscope telephoto zoom lens, a 10 megapixel f2.4 3x zoom, and a 12 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide. They can record video up to 8K 24 frames per second and also has macro capability. With the iPhone, we have 3 cameras, just like we have for years. We have a new 48 megapixel f1.8 aperture, a 12 megapixel f2.8 3x zoom, as well as a 12 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide. We have 4K ProRes, macro mode, and an action mode. So those are the newer things this year, and cinematic mode in 4K. Now let's go ahead and compare both the cameras and see how they actually do with different sort of conditions, and let me know what you think about it in the comments below. This is the forward-facing camera of the S22 Ultra and the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So this gives you an idea of what it can do in 4K 60. I really haven't changed any settings. It's just hit the record button and see what it can do. So here's the microphone from the 14 Pro Max compared to the microphone of the S22 Ultra. Let me know which one you think sounds best and looks best in the comments below. Now, as far as the overall speed of both of these devices, you're going to see some major differences when it comes to benchmark numbers, but real-world use may not be that different. With the S22 Ultra, we have the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, we have 12 gigabytes of RAM and storage up to 1 terabyte. With the iPhone 14 Pro Max, we have the A16 Bionic, 6 gigabytes of RAM, and again, storage up to 1 terabyte. Now, despite the S22 Ultra having double the RAM, the overall benchmarks are actually a little bit less, but it really comes down to what you're doing and how it performs. So first, let's go into Geekbench here, and I'll show you the difference as far as scores. You'll see the S22 Ultra scored 1,220 for single core versus the 14 Pro Max that scored 1,879 for single core. Multi-core on the S22 Ultra is 3,394 versus 5,441 on the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So it really depends on what you're doing as far as the overall experience, because numbers don't necessarily tell the whole story. So if we maybe go into the camera at the same time, we'll open that up. You'll see the iPhone was slightly faster that time. If we go into maybe the web browser, load the same page, they're about the exact same. The overall experience is going to be very, very similar with day-to-day use. Whether that's opening an app, maybe going in and playing a game, so we could do that, Real Racing 3. Let's go ahead and launch the same thing here. Now, if we go ahead and load Real Racing 3, we'll load them at the exact same time. Let's see how long this actually takes. So you'll see the S22 Ultra is already at the main screen there, and we're at about the same spot in both games. Very close, but the S22 Ultra was a little bit faster that time around. So very similar as far as overall performance there. Frame rates are good as well when you're playing the game, and I really don't see much of a speed difference with day-to-day use. The major difference would be with the neural engine in the iPhone 14 Pro Max that can actually help with processing photos and more. But with regular use, unless you're really pushing these things, you won't see much of a difference. Now, one of the most important things, of course, is battery life. And with the S22 Ultra, you have a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. With the 14 Pro Max, you have a 4,323 milliamp hour battery. Now, depending on which test you run or what you're actually doing with them, it can make the overall experience vary greatly. With the S22 Ultra and 14 Pro Max, you're going to get between 10 minutes to 2 hours of difference as far as the overall battery life, with the iPhone coming in a little bit better. So some tests I've seen as little as 10 minutes up to 2 hours or more. If you saw Mr. Who's the Boss tests, he actually had it about 2 hours better. It just depends what you're doing. If you're watching Netflix, or maybe you're just using YouTube, or if you're playing Real Racing 3, those things will make a very big difference in the overall experience. But both of them having giant batteries and the ability to fast charge at 15 watts wirelessly really seems to make these both great to use, and you will easily get through a day with both of them. But they're so similar, I really wouldn't pick one over the other based on battery alone, unless you're doing specifically heavy tasks with the camera or more. Now, as far as the OSs are concerned, both are really good at this point. We've reached a maturity level where it comes down to personal preference. You're really not gaining anything with iPhone over S22 Ultra, with the exception of maybe you have family members who use iMessage and they use that feature as well as Find My. That's actually what I find in my family, is everyone uses iPhones, so I pick this for that reason. If I had iMessage and everything else on the S22 Ultra, I may pick the S22 Ultra for a while. It really comes down to personal preference, as both OSs are quite good. They offer similar customization as far as the lock screen. So if we go to the lock screen here, you can fully customize it on the S22 Ultra, or you cannot customize it. That's the difference with Android. There's more customization, but iOS seems to be getting more and more of that now. As far as overall stability, well, Android seems to be a little bit more stable, which is something I thought I'd never say. iOS is quite good, but lately with iOS 16, it seems to be a little less stable as far as bugs and more. But both get regular updates, at least monthly, and that's a great thing. So hopefully both just continue to get stable and more mature. But it comes down to which ecosystem works best for you. If you want an Apple Watch, you're going to have to use an iPhone. If you don't care about that and you want something else, the Pixel Watch or Samsung watches or Garmin watches, whatever you'd like, you can pick the S22 Ultra and use whatever you'd like with it. Both will be supported for years as far as updates and security updates. Samsung has really bumped that up recently with the S22 lineup and previous updates where you get at least 4 years of features and security updates. And with the iPhone, Apple doesn't say, but you get about 5 to 7 years depending on the device in the past. So they don't give a guarantee, but that's what we've seen for many, many years. As far as which one you should choose, I think that comes down to personal preference because both are so good in their own way that they're both equal. They're similar priced. They're similar hardware. The iPhone feels a little bit more durable just because of the stainless steel maybe or the squared off edges, but they're both feel about the same. And I really have no complaints about either one as far as if I picked one over the other than the overall ecosystem itself. So if you picked the Samsung, I think you'd really enjoy it. If you pick the iPhone, I think you'd enjoy it. But let me know which one works best for you in the comments below. And of course, if you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, it will be linked in the description as always. If you haven't subscribed already though, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.